He threw his wife out for a mistress until the deed proved she owns the mansion. He thought she had nothing left. He thought she was broken, small, and finished. He stood on the front steps of that giant white mansion and laughed at her like she was a stray dog he was chasing out of his yard. But what he didn't know was that the woman he was throwing out into the cold had already signed one single piece of paper, a paper that would take everything he loved, everything he touched, and everything he believed was his, and hand it all over to her. Before we begin, if you enjoy real lifestyle stories about betrayal, quiet strength, and the moment a cheater finally loses everything, do me a small favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay with me until the very end of this video. Because the last 10 minutes of this story, you won't believe what she does to him. Trust me, you'll want to see his face when he finally reads that deed out loud. Now, let's go back to the night it all started. The front door of the Whitmore mansion swung open so hard it slammed against the marble wall. The sound echoed through the whole street like a gunshot. Elaine Whitmore stumbled forward, her bare feet sliding across the cold stone steps. Her silk robe was half open. Her hair was loose. Her eyes were wide, not with anger, not yet, just shock. The kind of shock that freezes a person in place. Behind her, standing in the warm yellow light of the doorway, was her husband, Richard Whitmore, tall, broad-shouldered, still in his open dress shirt from dinner. His face was red from wine and something uglier, pride. And beside him, holding his arm like she already lived there, was the other woman, Sophia, young, blonde, wearing one of Elaine's own robes, the white one with the small gold stitching on the sleeve. Elaine noticed that detail even in the middle of her own humiliation. The human mind is strange like that. When the world is falling apart, sometimes all you can see is a sleeve. "Get out," Richard said. His voice was calm, too calm. "This is my house, Elaine, and I don't want you in it anymore." Elaine turned slowly. The night air was cold on her skin. A neighbor across the street had just stepped out to bring in his trash can. He froze, staring. Another light flicked on in a second-floor window. People were watching. Of course they were watching. "Richard," she said quietly. Her voice didn't shake. "You don't want to do this," he laughed. Actually laughed. A short, mean sound. "I already did it, sweetheart," he said. 23 years of you. 23 years of the same face, the same silence, the same boring woman at every dinner. I'm done." Sophia smiled behind him. A small, pleased smile. "Richard," Elaine said again. Slower this time. "Please think about what you're saying." "I thought about it for a year," he said. "Now go. Call your sister. Call whoever. Just get off my property." Those 3 words, "my property," landed on her like a stone. Elaine took one long breath. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She simply looked at him, and for one tiny second, something flickered behind her eyes. Not sadness, something else, something that should have warned him. But Richard Whitmore had never been good at reading his wife. He slammed the door. The lock clicked, and Elaine Whitmore stood on the steps of her own mansion in a thin robe, with nothing in her hands, in front of the whole neighborhood. She looked up at the stars. She whispered one sentence to herself, a sentence nobody heard. "Okay, Richard, okay?" Then she walked down the driveway, past the fountain, past the tall iron gate, and disappeared into the night. Her feet hurt by the time she reached the end of the block. The stones were wet from the sprinklers. Small pieces of gravel dug into her heels. She didn't stop. She didn't have a phone. She didn't have a purse. She didn't even have shoes. But she had one thing. She had a plan. A plan she had built quietly over many months in the dark corners of her own marriage. A plan she hoped she would never have to use. A plan she had prayed was wrong. Tonight, sadly, it was right. She walked past 3 houses before she stopped. A neighbor she barely knew, a kind older woman named Mrs. Alvarez, was standing by her mailbox. Mrs. Alvarez had seen everything, the whole scene, the open door, the shouting, the other woman in the robe. "Elaine, honey," Mrs. Alvarez whispered, rushing forward. Come inside right now." Elaine didn't argue. She walked in, The house smelled like coffee and lemon cleaner. Mrs. Alvarez wrapped her in a warm blanket and pushed a cup of tea into her hands. She didn't ask questions. She didn't say sorry. She just sat next to her on the couch. After a long silence, Elaine finally spoke. "May I use your phone?" "Of course, sweetheart." Elaine dialed one number. Only one. She didn't call her sister. She didn't call the police. She didn't call a friend. She called a man named Howard Briggs, her lawyer. The phone rang twice. "Howard," she said in a voice that sounded almost normal. "It happened. Tonight. Bring the file." There was a pause on the other end. Then one sentence. "I'm on my way, Mrs. Whitmore." She hung up. Mrs. Alvarez looked at her. "Are you okay, dear?" Elaine finally smiled. A tiny smile. The kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I will be," she said. "Very, very soon." Meanwhile, back inside the Whitmore mansion, Richard was pouring himself another glass of wine. He felt amazing, lighter than he had felt in years. Like a man who had just dropped a heavy suitcase he had been carrying up a long hill. Sophia walked slowly into the living room, her bare feet on the thick white carpet. The fireplace glowed. The ceiling was high enough to echo. "I can't believe you actually did it," she whispered. "I thought you'd never do it." Richard smiled. That wide, white, dentist-bright smile that had fooled so many people for so many years. "I'm a man of my word, baby," he said. "I told you I'd get her out. I got her out." He walked to the big bay window and looked at the front yard. The fountain was still running. The stone driveway shone under the moon. 12,000 square feet of marble, glass, oak, and brass. 7 bedrooms. A wine cellar. A pool. A tennis court. A private gym. "All of this," he said, lifting his glass. "Ours." Sophia giggled behind him. What Richard didn't notice was that his hand was shaking. Just a little. Just enough that the red wine rippled in the glass. Somewhere deep inside, something in him, some old animal instinct, knew something was wrong. But he drank the wine anyway, because Richard Whitmore never listened to his instincts. Let me tell you who Elaine Whitmore really was. Because Richard never really knew. Elaine grew up in a small town in Ohio. Her father was a carpenter. Her mother was a school nurse. She was the kind of girl who sat in the front row of class, always finished her homework, and never raised her voice. People called her the quiet one. Teachers loved her. Boys didn't notice her. Then she went to college on a scholarship. Business major. Straight A's. She could have gone anywhere. Done anything. She met Richard in her last year. He was a loud law student with a big laugh and an even bigger ego. He chased her for 6 months. She finally said yes. They married young. Here's the part Richard forgot. Elaine's grandmother had died when Elaine was 26. Her grandmother was a quiet woman too. A woman who had lived through hard times. A woman who had saved every penny for 50 years. And when she died, she left Elaine something that surprised everyone in the family. Money. Quiet money. The kind of money nobody talks about at Thanksgiving dinner. Elaine never told anyone how much. Not even Richard. Her grandmother's last letter to her had said one line that Elaine remembered every single day of her marriage. "Keep something of your own, sweetheart. Always keep something of your own." So she did. And 12 years ago, when Richard came home and announced in his loud, proud voice that he had found the perfect mansion, a 12,000 square foot house on the hill, Elaine had quietly suggested something. "Let me handle the paperwork, honey. You're too busy at the firm." Richard had laughed. "Fine. Whatever. Just sign where they tell you." He had never read the deed. Not once. Not in 12 years. If you're still watching, this is where things start to change. Because right now, Richard is drinking wine in his living room, thinking he's the king of the castle. And Elaine, she's sitting on a neighbor's couch, waiting for her lawyer, holding a secret that's about to burn his whole life to the ground. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see what happens next. Because the next twist, nobody sees it coming. A black sedan pulled up in front of Mrs. Alvarez's house at 11:47 p.m. A man in a gray suit stepped out. Howard Briggs. 62 years old. Silver hair. Round glasses. A brown leather folder under his arm. He had been Elaine's lawyer for 10 years. A quiet man. A careful man. The kind of lawyer who read every word of every page twice. He walked up the path and knocked softly. Mrs. Alvarez opened the door. "She's in the kitchen," the older woman whispered. Howard nodded and walked in. Elaine was sitting at the small wooden kitchen table. She was still in the robe, but Mrs. Alvarez had given her a pair of slippers and a sweater. She looked up when Howard came in. Her eyes were clear now. No tears, no shaking. Howard pulled out a chair and sat down. He placed the brown folder on the table between them. "Are you sure, Elaine?" he asked softly. "Once we start this, we can't stop it." She looked at the folder for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Once." "Start it, Howard." He opened the folder. Inside, the top page was old, slightly yellow at the edges. A deed to the property at 44112 Hillcrest Drive, the Whitmore Mansion. And on the owner's line, printed in neat black letters, was one single name: Elaine Margaret Whitmore. Not Richard. Not Richard and Elaine. Not Whitmore Family Trust. Just Elaine. "The bank records?" she asked. Howard flipped to the next page. "All 12 years of mortgage payments came from your personal account, Elaine. The account funded by your grandmother's inheritance. Every single payment. The house has been paid off for 4 years. Richard never contributed a single dollar. You have the bank statements, the canceled checks, and the wire transfers. It's airtight. The utilities, your account. The property taxes, your account. The insurance, your account." Elaine closed her eyes for a moment. 12 years of quiet, 12 years of writing checks without saying a word, 12 years of letting him believe he was the man of the house. "What about Sophia?" she asked. Howard raised one eyebrow. He pulled out a second, thinner folder. "I had a private investigator on Richard for 9 months, as you requested. Hotel receipts, credit card charges, photos, text messages recovered from the shared cloud account. A bank transfer of $48,000 to a Miss Sophia Larson 3 weeks ago. He bought her a car, Elaine, using money from your joint savings." Elaine's jaw tightened. "Just a tiny bit. That was the only sign. Is it enough?" Howard nodded slowly. "It's more than enough. Adultery, misuse of marital funds. And now tonight he has publicly locked the legal owner of the property out of her own home, in front of witnesses. Elaine, he just gave us everything we need." She opened her eyes. They were a little wet now, but she still didn't cry. "File it all," she said quietly. "Divorce. Eviction notice on Richard. Full claim on the assets. And Howard. Yes, I want to be there when he finds out. I want to see his face." Howard smiled for the first time that night. A small, careful smile. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, "it would be my honor." The next morning, Richard woke up with a headache. Sunlight was pouring through the bedroom window. Sophia was still asleep next to him, her blonde hair spread across Elaine's pillow. The house was quiet in a new way, not the cold silence of his marriage. A different silence. A silence he had chosen. He smiled. He got out of bed, put on his silk robe, and walked downstairs. He made himself coffee in the fancy espresso machine that Elaine had bought 3 Christmases ago. He sat on the back patio. He looked at the pool. "Good morning, world," he said out loud. His phone buzzed on the glass table. A text message from an unknown number. He picked it up. Read it. Frowned. "Mr. Whitmore, please check your front porch. H. Briggs, attorney at law." Richard laughed. "Who the hell is H. Briggs?" He stood up and walked through the house to the front door. He opened it. On the white stone porch was a thick manila envelope. He picked it up. It was heavy. Too heavy for junk mail. He tore it open right there on the porch. He pulled out the top document. He started reading. His eyes moved from left to right, then back to the top, then down again. His face began to change. First confusion, then anger, then, and this was the moment, then came something new. Something Richard Whitmore had rarely felt in his whole arrogant life. Fear. "What the hell is this?" he whispered. The document in his hand was a formal eviction notice, addressed to him, signed by a judge, requiring him to vacate the property at 44112 Hillcrest Drive within 72 hours. The property owned solely by Elaine Margaret Whitmore. "This is a joke," he said, but his voice didn't sound sure. He turned the page. The next document was a certified copy of the deed. Her name, only her name, dated 12 years ago, signed, stamped, filed and legally binding. He turned another page, a divorce filing, with 14 attached exhibits, photos, bank statements, hotel receipts, a transfer record for $48,000 to one Sophia Larson. Richard stood there on his own porch, no, not his porch, he realized slowly, not his porch at all, holding the papers that destroyed his entire life. He felt the blood drain from his face. Sophia, he shouted suddenly, Sophia, get down here. Sophia came down the marble staircase in a black silk nightgown, yawning. Baby, what's wrong? Why are you yelling? Richard held up the papers. His hand was shaking now, shaking badly. She owns the house, he said. Sophia blinked. What? Elaine, she owns the whole house, the whole thing. It's in her name, only her name. She's evicting me. Sophia's face went through a beautiful series of expressions in under 5 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, calculation, and finally, coldness. Wait, she said slowly. What do you mean she owns the house? I mean exactly what I said. Richard snapped. She has the deed. The deed is in her name. She paid for everything, all 12 years. Me, I never, he stopped. His brain was trying to catch up. I never even read the paperwork. Sophia stared at him, really stared. You said this house was worth $4 million, she said quietly. It is, he shouted. It was. It's not mine, Sophia. So what about your company? She asked. What about your savings? Your stocks? Richard looked down at the papers again. His eyes moved to page 7, then page 8, then page 9. He read them all. She's filing for 50% of all marital assets, he whispered, plus damages, plus legal fees, plus the $48,000 back that I gave you, that you gave me, Sophia repeated. Her voice was cold as ice now. Sophia, don't. Richard, she crossed her arms. Let me get this straight. You don't own the house. You might lose your business. You might lose your savings. And on top of that, you're about to be publicly humiliated in court. It's not that bad, he said quickly. I'll fight it. I'll hire lawyers. Will we? Sophia laughed. A short, mean laugh, almost like his own laugh from the night before. Baby, he said. Come on. It's us. We're a team. She looked at him like he was a stranger in her way. Richard, honey, she said slowly, I think I left something at my apartment. I'm going to go get it. And with that, Sophia Larson turned around, walked upstairs, got dressed in under 11 minutes, came back down, walked past him without another word, got into the little white sports car he had bought her with his wife's money, and drove away. She never came back. Richard Whitmore stood alone on the porch of a mansion that wasn't his, holding a stack of papers that proved he had thrown away his own life. While Richard stood frozen on the porch, Elaine was sitting in a small, clean hotel suite 12 miles away. She had slept for 3 hours. Not much, but enough. Howard had booked her a room under a different name, Margaret Carter, an old habit of his from divorces he had handled before. He knew how husbands like Richard behaved once the truth landed. Elaine showered, put on a simple navy blue dress that Howard's assistant had brought over that morning, drank a cup of black coffee. She looked at herself in the mirror. For the first time in many years, she didn't see a tired woman. She saw a calm one, a clear one, a woman with her own name on the deed. Her phone buzzed. Howard calling. He got the papers, Howard said. Good. He tried to call the firm 7 times in the last hour. I had the receptionist tell him I'm in a meeting. Good. And Sophia left him. There was a small pause. Then Elaine laughed. A short, soft laugh. The first real laugh in maybe 2 years. Of course she did, Howard. Of course she did. The court date is set for 3 weeks from today. But I have a feeling his own lawyers will push him to settle long before that. Once they see the evidence, Elaine, they'll beg him to take the deal. I don't want a deal, Howard. He was quiet. No. I want the court date. I want the judge. I want Richard to hear it all read out loud. Every piece. Every page. I want him to sit there in that courtroom and hear the deed read into the record. Howard was quiet for a long moment. Understood, Mrs. Whitmore. She hung up. She walked to the window. She looked out at the city. And for the first time in a very long time, Elaine Whitmore took a full, deep, easy breath. The next 48 hours were the worst of Richard Whitmore's life. He called his law firm, his own partners, men he had worked beside for 20 years. They all had the same careful voice on the phone. "Rich, buddy, you need to hire outside counsel. We can't represent you on this one." Conflict of interest. He called his bank, his accountant, his best friend from college. Nobody wanted to get involved. He called his brother in Chicago. His brother answered, listened for about 30 seconds, then said, "Richard, I love you, but I warned you about that girl. I gotta go." Click. Finally, he sat down in the big leather chair in the living room, the chair Elaine had bought him for his 50th birthday, and he started to really think. He thought about the deed. He thought about all the times Elaine had handled the paperwork. He thought about all the times she had quietly written checks while he bragged at dinner parties about his house. He thought about all the times she had stayed silent when he interrupted her, all the times he had laughed at her clothes, all the times he had forgotten her birthday, all the times he had stayed out late with Sophia and come home smelling like perfume, and Elaine had simply said nothing. Nothing. 12 years of nothing. And suddenly, he understood. The nothing wasn't weakness. The nothing was a plan. "Oh my God," he whispered to the empty room. And for the first time in his adult life, Richard Whitmore put his face in his hands and cried. 3 weeks later, on a cold Tuesday morning, the county courthouse was packed. Word had gotten out. It always does, in small, wealthy towns. The story of Richard Whitmore, big shot lawyer, big shot husband, big shot cheater, had spread through every country club, every golf course, every dinner party within 100 miles. People came to watch. Old friends, old neighbors, old co-workers, reporters even. A local news station had sent a young woman with a camera. The story had legs. Husband evicts wife from mansion she secretly owns was the kind of headline that sold papers. Elaine arrived at 8:47 a.m. She wore a simple black dress, no jewelry, except for her grandmother's small gold ring. Her hair was up. Her face was calm. Howard walked beside her, brown folder under one arm, gray suit, round glasses. The cameras flashed. "Mrs. Whitmore. Mrs. Whitmore. Any comment?" She didn't say a word. She just walked. Inside the courtroom, she sat in the front row, straight-backed, hands folded in her lap. At 9:02 a.m., Richard walked in. He looked 10 years older than he had 3 weeks ago. His face was thinner. His eyes were tired. He was wearing a nice suit, but it hung on him differently now, like it belonged to a bigger man. His lawyer walked beside him, a fancy one from the city, expensive, sharp. Richard saw Elaine. He stopped walking. For about 3 full seconds in the middle of the courtroom, he just stared at her. And she, slowly, calmly turned her head and looked right back at him. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She just looked. And Richard Whitmore felt for the first time in their 23-year marriage that he didn't know this woman at all. Never had. The judge walked in. Everyone stood. "Be seated," the judge said. "Let's get started. Stay with me, because what happens next in that courtroom changes everything." The moment Howard stands up and starts reading that deed out loud, in front of Richard, in front of the judge, in front of the whole packed room, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel every piece of Richard's world crack and fall. If you're enjoying this story, drop a like right now and let me know in the comments. Would you have stayed quiet for 12 years like Elaine did? Or would you have exploded on day one? Let's see what happens when the truth finally comes out. Howard Briggs stood up slowly. "Your Honor," he said, "I'd like to begin by entering Exhibit A into the record." "Proceed, counselor." Howard opened the brown folder. He walked to the center of the courtroom. He placed a single piece of paper on the small table in front of the judge. "This is a certified copy of the deed to the property at 4412 Hillcrest Drive, filed with the county recorder 12 years ago on March 19th. I'll read the key line for the record." He paused. The room went completely silent. "Owner of record," Howard read. "Elaine Margaret Whitmore, sole owner. No co-signers. No joint ownership. No trust arrangement. Just one name." You could hear a pin drop. Richard's head turned slowly toward his lawyer. His lawyer was staring down at his notes, not meeting his eye. Howard continued. Over the past 12 years, Your Honor, Mrs. Whitmore has paid every mortgage installment, every property tax bill, every homeowner's insurance premium, and every major renovation cost, entirely from her personal inheritance account. I have bank records going back 144 months. He placed a thick stack of papers on the table. Exhibit B. Every single check, every single transfer. Richard's lawyer slowly leaned over and whispered something in Richard's ear. Richard whispered back, harder. The lawyer whispered again. Richard shook his head. The whispering got sharper. Howard kept going. Exhibit C. Your Honor. Photographs and financial records showing a pattern of marital betrayal beginning approximately 18 months ago. Mr. Whitmore has been conducting a relationship with a Miss Sophia Larson. During this relationship, he transferred $48,000 of marital funds to Miss Larson, purchased a vehicle for her, and paid for hotel stays, dinners, and personal items across 6 different cities. A small gasp ran through the gallery. Elaine didn't move. She didn't blink. On the night of the eviction, Howard said, Mr. Whitmore publicly expelled my client from her own property, in her robe, without shoes, in front of multiple witnesses. We have 3 signed statements from neighbors. I'd like to enter those as Exhibits D, E, and F. The judge nodded. Howard placed 3 more documents on the table. Your Honor, based on the deed, the payment history, the documented adultery, the misuse of marital funds, and the public eviction of the legal owner from her own property, we are asking the court for the following. He turned to face Richard. He looked him right in the eye. 1. Immediate and permanent removal of Mr. Whitmore from the residence at 44412 Hillcrest Drive. Richard's jaw tightened. 2. Full and final divorce, with Mrs. Whitmore retaining 100% of her personal assets, including the home, the grounds, all furniture and personal property contained within. Richard's hand clenched into a fist on the table. 3. Division of all joint marital assets, including Mr. Whitmore's business holdings, stock portfolio, and retirement accounts, with Mrs. Whitmore receiving 50% as is standard in this state for a marriage of this length. Richard's face went pale. 4. Full repayment of the $48,000 in marital funds spent on Miss Larson, plus legal fees, plus damages for emotional distress caused by the public humiliation of the eviction. Richard's lawyer put a hand on his arm. And 5. Your Honor. Howard paused. He looked at Elaine. She gave the smallest nod. Mrs. Whitmore would like the record to formally reflect that she is, and has always been, the sole and lawful owner of the property at 4412 Hillcrest Drive. Not Mr. Whitmore, not jointly, her, alone. The judge looked down at the documents. He flipped through them slowly. He adjusted his glasses. Then he looked up. Mr. Whitmore, the judge said, do you have any evidence that disputes the ownership of this property? Richard stood up slowly. His mouth opened. No words came out. Mr. Whitmore? The judge repeated. Richard started. His voice cracked. I wasn't aware. I thought the house was. Mr. Whitmore, the judge said calmly, I'm not asking what you thought. I'm asking what you can prove. Richard looked at his lawyer. His lawyer looked at the floor. Your Honor, Richard's lawyer said quietly, we have no evidence to present on the matter of ownership. The judge nodded. Very well. He turned to Howard. Counselor, prepare the final orders. I'll have them signed by end of day. And just like that, in under 40 minutes, it was done. 23 years of marriage, 12 years of silent payments, 18 months of cheating, 1 night of humiliation. Over. Richard sat down slowly. He stared at the table. He didn't move for almost a full minute. Around him, the gallery was whispering. His lawyer was packing papers. The judge was standing up to leave. And Elaine, calm, quiet, steady Elaine, finally stood. She walked past the front row. She walked past the table. She walked right up to where Richard sat, staring at nothing. She stopped about 3 feet away. He looked up at her. His eyes were full of tears now. Not fake tears, real ones. The kind a man cries when he finally understands what he has done. Elaine, he whispered, I'm sorry, please, I'm so sorry. I'll fix it. She raised one hand, just slightly. He stopped talking. Richard, she said. Her voice was soft, almost kind. He waited. "Do you remember," she said, "3 Christmases ago, when you told me in front of your partners that I had aged poorly, and then you laughed, and they laughed, and I just smiled and refilled the wine?" He closed his eyes. "Yes," he whispered. "Do you remember 2 years ago when I came home from the hospital after my surgery and you forgot to pick me up? And when I finally got a cab home, you were in the living room on the phone with Sophia, laughing about a trip to Miami? Elaine, do you remember last year when you told me at our anniversary dinner, Richard, our anniversary dinner, that I was the most boring person you had ever met?" His face crumpled. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." She tilted her head a little. "Richard," she said gently, "I forgave you for all of it. Every single thing. For years. I forgave you in silence because I was raised to be a good wife. But the night you put me out of my own house, in front of my neighbors, in a robe, with no shoes, that night, Richard, I stopped forgiving." She leaned forward just slightly. "And Richard, yes, I want you to know something. I want you to hear this very clearly from my own mouth." The whole courtroom was listening now. Nobody even pretended not to. "You didn't lose the house because I'm cruel," she said. "You didn't lose it because of the lawyer, or the judge, or even the deed." She took one small breath. "You lost it because you were loud in a quiet woman's house, and you forgot that quiet women pay attention." Richard's shoulders began to shake. Elaine straightened. She picked up her small black purse, and then she walked past him, past the lawyer, past the reporters, past every whispering face in the gallery, and out the double doors of the courtroom into the bright winter sun. She never looked back. That afternoon, at exactly 3:14 p.m., Elaine Whitmore pulled her car into the driveway of 44 Feltove Hillcrest Drive. The fountain was running. The front door was still there, the same white stone, the same tall brass handle. But this time, when she walked up the steps, it was different. This time, the key in her hand was the only key. Richard had been escorted out by the sheriff's department at 1 p.m. His belongings were packed into boxes on the grass. Clothes, shoes, golf clubs, a box of old law books, 2 framed photos from college. That was it. That was all he had. She watched him once, from a distance, as he loaded the last box into a rental car. He looked small, smaller than she had ever seen him. He didn't look up at the house. He didn't look at her. He just drove away. She unlocked the door. The house was quiet. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. She walked slowly through the hallway, past the big living room, past the kitchen, past the staircase. She walked into her own bedroom. She opened the closet. She pulled out the robe that Sophia had worn. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she carried it downstairs, walked out to the backyard, opened the lid of the outdoor fire pit, and dropped it inside. She struck a match. The robe caught fire slowly at first, then all at once. She watched it burn. She didn't smile, but she didn't cry either. When it was only ashes, she went back inside. She made herself a cup of tea. She sat down in the big leather chair in the living room. Yes, the one she had bought him for his 50th birthday, and for the first time in 12 years, she put her feet up on the coffee table, and she rested. In the months that followed, Elaine Whitmore's life changed in slow, quiet, beautiful ways. She repainted the bedroom. Soft cream, warm light. She took down the heavy dark curtains Richard had always loved and replaced them with light linen. She turned his old office into a small library for herself. Her grandmother's old books, a rocking chair by the window, a reading lamp. She started a small charity in her grandmother's name, a fund that helped quiet women, women trapped in bad marriages, without money, without a way out, women like she had almost been, women who had no inheritance to fall back on. She hired a small staff, a social worker, a legal aid volunteer, a young woman named Marisol who had escaped her own bad marriage and knew what these women needed. The charity grew fast. Word spread. Within a year, Elaine had helped 17 women leave dangerous homes. Within 2 years, she had helped over 100. She gave quiet interviews, small ones, no shouting, no drama, just her calm voice saying one sentence over and over. Every woman needs something of her own, no matter what, no matter how much she loves him. Something of her own. Her grandmother would have been proud. And Richard Whitmore moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of town, the kind of apartment with thin walls and a parking lot outside the window. His law firm quietly pushed him out within 4 months. Something about protecting the brand. He didn't fight it. He didn't have the energy. He tried to call Sophia. She had blocked his number. He tried to call Elaine. She had blocked his number too, but politely, through Howard. He tried to call his brother in Chicago. His brother said, "Rich, I love you, but I can't help you till you fix yourself." Click. He spent 6 months drinking too much. Then one morning, he woke up on his couch, stared at the cheap ceiling, and started to cry. Really cry. The kind of crying a man does when he's finally alone with the truth. He stopped drinking after that. He got a small job at a legal aid office. The irony of it was not lost on him. He helped poor people fill out forms. He made $42,000 a year. He ate cereal for dinner. Sometimes, on cold nights, he would drive past Hillcrest Drive. He would slow down at the tall iron gate. He would look up at the warm yellow lights in the windows of the mansion that had never been his. And then he would drive home to his small apartment, and he would sit in the dark and think about one sentence. Just one. Quiet women pay attention. 1 year to the day after the eviction, Elaine hosted a small dinner at the mansion. Not a big dinner, not a dramatic one, just 8 people around the big dining room table. Howard, the lawyer. Mrs. Alvarez, the neighbor who had opened her door on that cold night. Marisol, the young woman from the charity. Elaine's sister who had finally flown in from Ohio. 4 women from the shelter, women Elaine had helped start over. They ate slowly. They drank good wine. They laughed. Toward the end of the evening, Marisol raised her glass. "To Elaine," she said, "who reminded us all that quiet doesn't mean weak." "To Elaine," everyone said. Elaine smiled. A real smile this time, not a small one. A full, warm, open smile. "To my grandmother," she said quietly, "who told me to always keep something of my own." Everyone raised their glasses. Outside, the fountain was still running. The stars were out. The big white mansion glowed softly against the dark sky. And inside, for the first time in many, many years, the house sounded like a home. Because that's what it had become. Hers. Completely, finally, hers. Here's the thing about Elaine Whitmore. She didn't win because she was lucky. She didn't win because she was mean. She didn't win because she was loud or angry or cruel. She won because, a long time ago, a wise old woman told her one simple sentence. And she listened. Keep something of your own. That's it. That's the whole story. A man who thinks he owns everything is a man who will lose everything the moment the truth comes out. And a woman who quietly owns one important thing, one deed, one account, one paper, with her name on it, is a woman who can never be thrown out of her own life. Richard thought he was throwing Elaine out of his mansion. He was really throwing himself out of hers. He just didn't know it yet. So let me ask you something, and I really want to hear your answer. First question. If you were Elaine, would you have waited 12 years, quietly paying every bill and keeping that deed in your own name? Or would you have confronted Richard the first time you sensed something was wrong? Second question. Do you think Elaine was too kind in that courtroom? Should she have said more? Or was her quiet, calm speech the perfect ending for a man like Richard? And third, do you believe Richard truly changed at the end? Or is he still deep down the same arrogant man who threw his wife out on the front steps? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one. I'm really curious what you think. And if this story moved you, if you felt something when Howard read that deed out loud, if you smiled when Sophia drove away, if you cheered when Elaine walked out of that courtroom into the sun, do me one last favor. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and ring the little bell so you never miss another story like this one. Because I've got more true-to-life stories coming. Stories about quiet people who were underestimated. Stories about cheaters who finally got caught. Stories about justice that takes a long time but always, always arrives. And one more thing before you go. If you're out there right now, in a relationship where someone talks down to you, belittles you, cheats on you, or treats your silence like your weakness, remember Elaine. Remember the deed. Remember the 12 years. Remember the night she walked out barefoot. And remember what happened 3 weeks later in that courtroom. Quiet isn't weak. Quiet is patient. Quiet is watching. Quiet is building. And one day, when the moment is right, quiet wins. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next story.